Welcome back, everyone. I am so incredibly excited for today's deep dive because, well, we're doing something a little bit different. Think of today's session as kind of a retro-futuristic history lesson. We're going to analyze a largely forgotten cultural artifact from the year 2006, and we'll use it as a lens to understand the massive shifts we've seen in media, corporate power, and critical thinking over the last 2 decades. So get comfortable, focus in, and let's get right into it. Okay, let's start with a pretty wild question. What if the most accurate documentary of the 21st century wasn't made by a serious journalist, but was actually a forgotten 2006 comedy directed by Mike Judge called Idiocracy? Now, for our younger viewers, or really anyone who wasn't closely following early 2000s cinematic satire, you might be completely unfamiliar with this movie. At the time of its release, it was a massive box office bomb. People dismissed it, it was completely ignored, but as we're going to see today, it turns out it wasn't a joke at all. It was actually a warning. Here is our syllabus for today. First, the 2006 accidental prophecy. Second, the decline in critical thinking. Third, rise of the mega-monopolies. Fourth, profits over the planet. And finally, speedrunning the dystopia. Section 1. The 2006 accidental prophecy. 130. To understand why this incredibly accurate warning was completely ignored, we really have to look at the literal crime scene of its release. And make no mistake, how this movie was treated by its own creators was an absolute Hollywood anomaly. It was intentionally buried. You see, 130 is the number of theaters 20th Century Fox dumped this movie into over Labor Day weekend back in 2006, and it was mostly in Texas. Now remember, this was a $30 million movie. Usually studios buy billboards, they run trailers, they send their actors on these massive press tours. Fox? They did none of that. No trailers, no press kits, no critic screenings. They essentially just buried it in the desert. Why? Well, because the studio executives were absolutely terrified. The movie brutally satirized massive corporations, and Fox was so afraid of offending their major advertisers that they decided, hey, it's financially safer to completely lose a $30 million investment than to risk upsetting a major coffee chain or a big box store. When Mike Judge wrote the script, the whole premise was that an average, totally unremarkable guy gets frozen and wakes up 500 years in the future, in the year 2505, only to discover that humanity has completely devolved. Judge intended for this devolution to take 5 centuries. But look at our timeline here. We managed to hit his major dystopian milestones in just 2 decades. Crazy, right? We basically skipped the 500-year wait and brought the fiction right into our present-day reality. Section 2, the decline in critical thinking. This brings us to arguably the film's most glaring parallel to modern life, which is the collapse of academic standards and what honestly feels like a cultural war on intelligence itself. Back in 2006, the film's average guy protagonist was treated as a suspicious intellectual threat. He was mocked, he was threatened simply for using articulate sentences, while the supposed experts were just whoever could yell the loudest. Today, well, complex political and social discourse is frequently reduced to 3-word chants. Nuanced expertise is increasingly viewed with deep suspicion, while highly produced, super loud influencers are trusted implicitly over people with actual PhDs. Let's look at some objective case studies that the source text highlights regarding this specific cultural shift. We've seen a massive pivot where doing your own research via social media algorithms is often valued higher than decades of actual academic consensus. We've documented the widespread harassment of public health officials. And overarching all of this is a near-complete erosion of trust in traditional institutions. We went from a society that, generally speaking, valued institutional knowledge to one that frequently rewards the loudest, most controversial voices in the room. And it mirrors the exact anti-intellectual society depicted in the film. And, it's not just how we think, it's how we speak. In Idiocracy, the English language has literally devolved into a hybrid of grunts and corporate catchphrases. Complex thought basically goes extinct because, well, it's just too hard. Today, youth culture and online communication are totally dominated by slang like skibidi and riz. Now, obviously slang has always existed, but the source makes a really fascinating point here. Our communication is being actively optimized for viral, short-form algorithms rather than for nuance. Our attention spans are shrinking to fit the platform, and that's fundamentally altering our discourse. Section 3. Rise of the mega-monopolies. So, the devolution of the individual is really only half the problem. The other half is total corporatization. Basically, a world where the government barely exists and a handful of mega-monopolies run absolutely everything.
The film gave us these absurd exaggerations, a Costco spanning the size of a city that literally contains a law school inside it, and Carl's Jr. fast food joints completely run by unfeeling automated computer kiosks that decide your fate. But honestly, that doesn't look like an exaggeration anymore. It just looks like a standard Tuesday. We are living through the rapid, aggressive consolidation of retail and entertainment into massive mega-monopolies like Amazon, Disney, and Walmart, right alongside the total automation of our frontline retail and service industries. I want to inject a quick, really surprising fact right here to show just how deep these accidental predictions went. When filming the movie, the costume designer had a tiny budget. So to outfit the dystopian citizens, she bought cheap, startup foam boating shoes specifically because, in her own words, they were too ugly to ever become popular. Those shoes? They were Crocs. By simply trying to find the ugliest, cheapest thing imaginable for a devolved society, the movie accidentally predicted the most dominant footwear trend of the modern era. You literally can't make this stuff up.
Section 4. Profits over the planet. This is where the comedy gets incredibly dark, highlighting the environmental costs of prioritizing quarterly earnings reports over our long-term survival through what we can call the Brando paradox. In the film, a mega-corporation bought the FDA. They started watering the nation's crops with their sports drink, Brando, because their marketing claimed it had electrolytes. So, step 1, the crops all die. Step 2, society refuses to stop using Brando because of the marketing. And step 3, when the main character suggests switching back to plain water, he's told they can't do that because it would hurt Brando's stock price. This is absolutely the darkest joke in the film. Knowing exactly what is destroying your society, but being entirely paralyzed to stop it just because of the stock market. And that paralysis leads directly to literal ruin. In the film, there are mountains of unhidden garbage that eventually cause a great garbage avalanche. It was a visual gag back in 2006. But today, we have the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. We have microplastics being discovered in human blood. We have literal mountains of discarded, cheap, fast fashion piling up in the Atacama Desert in Chile. Mike Judge didn't have a crystal ball. He literally just looked at a graph of American hyperconsumption and followed the line to its absolute logical and honestly terrifying conclusion. Section 5. Speedrunning the dystopia. We have synthesized the cultural shifts, the corporate consolidation, and the environmental disregard. So what is the ultimate takeaway from this buried artifact? Well, let's let the director speak for himself. When recently asked about the shocking accuracy of his film, Mike Judge said, "I'm no prophet. I was off by 490 years. This is our thematic anchor for today's analysis. It perfectly encapsulates the compression of the timeline. The warning was absolutely sound, but the pace at which we embrace the very things we used to laugh at is what is truly staggering." Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative question, directly inspired by our source material. I want you to take a second to really think about this. Looking at the algorithms that shape our thoughts, the corporate monopolies that control our resources, and the erosion of our complex discourse, are we still the audience watching the movie, or are we already the extras in the background? I really want you to take that thought with you today as you scroll, as you shop, and as you learn. Thank you so much for joining me for today's session. Keep asking questions, and I will see you next time.